Hello, I'm Micki Pistorius, author, profiler, and psychologist. Humankind has always had the habit of collecting memorabilia of significant occasions in their lives. And as they walk down memory lane, sweet nostalgia is attached to certain souvenirs to remind them of happier yesteryears. Now, generations ago, this could have been stubs of movie tickets, or it could have been postcards. Today, it would more likely be selfies that is posted on Facebook. People also collect trophies, which they proudly display in their cabinets or on their mantelpieces to remind themselves and other people of the achievements in their lives. Now, serial killers, just like other people, also collect memorabilia and trophies. It could be jewelry that they collected from the victims. It could be clothing. Some of them take photographs. And these they use as reminders during self-stimulation. Now, some serial killers collect body parts. Murder robbery detectives in South Africa have this unique challenge in an investigation when they find body parts missing on a crime scene, because it could either point to a Muti murder or it could point to a serial killer. Now, Muti murders is when certain body parts are harvested by witch doctors and then used to make potent medicine. So, South Africa, usually we found the bodies are being discarded in vast open veld and areas. And it is only when a pedestrian is lured from the footpath by the putrid smell of the decomposing body that we find them. So by the time we get to the crime scene, the bodies are decomposed. It could be that the body part that is missing is just rotten away, or it could be that it was harvested, or it could be that it was eaten by scavengers. In any case, it makes the investigation very challenging. Also, because the perpetrator was unknown to the victim. As is the case of serial killers, where mostly the victims are just innocent people that are attacked by the serial killers. So, not all serial killers are Muti murders, and not all Muti murders are serial killers, obviously. There was the case, as I discussed in a previous video, of John Harvey, who was a serial killer who harvested body parts for his own self-stimulation and not because he considered it as Muti. The archetypal concept of a witch doctor is associated with dark Africa in the collective subconscious of the human psyche. And witch doctors or sorcerers go by different names, but generally we will call them umsakatsi. And they should be distinguished from traditional healers. Now, in the common lingua franca, traditional healers are also in different categories. There could be the Inyanga, who works with herbs and he cures illnesses, physical illnesses, or she. Or there could be the Sangoma, who uses divination to address psychological problems if a person do not want to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So, traditional healers are not witch doctors, and this differentiation is taken very seriously by the South African medical community and by the government. So, South Africa's Traditional Health Practitioners Act 22 of 2007 aimed to establish the Interim Traditional Health Practitioners Council of South Africa and to provide for the management and the control over the registration, training, and conduct of practitioners, students, and specified categories in the traditional health practitioners profession. The Traditional Healers Organization argued that the new act should address the problem of violence associated with witchcraft and should provide a definition of busakatsi or witchcraft. So busakatsi refers to witchcraft in an African context, and it includes the harmful use of medicine, harmful magic, and other means or devices that may cause illnesses, misfortune, or death to a person or damage to property. So those guilty of practicing it is called umsakatsi. So, despite the fact that there is a clear distinction between sorcerers, witch doctors, and traditional healers, sorcery is still very rife in South Africa. And this is where the witch doctors use body parts of animals, but also of human beings in their muti, in their medicine. The Human Tissue Act of 1983 states, any person who participates in the unlawful and intentional killing of a person in order to unlawfully remove any body part from that person, or participates in any act which results in the unlawful removal of any body part of a person, or participates in any trade in human body parts for purposes of making muti, shall be guilty of an offence. Now, in May 1993, a year before I joined the South African Police Service, a 4-year-old little girl, a 2-year-old little girl and a 4-year-old little boy were playing in a township in Rykiesfontein when they were approached by a man who offered them sweets. And he lured them into a blue gum forest, where he violated them and he tortured them by pulling their teeth with pliers, and then he strangled them and he covered them with foliage, and then he left. The 4-year-old little girl was alive, and she managed to dig herself out, and she ran towards the community, and she was bleeding, and they were happy to see her because they'd been looking for her since the previous night. Because since 1988, children had been missing from that community. So the little girl showed the community and the police the crime scene, where they found the bodies of her friends, but they also found several other bodies. They identified a 7-year-old little Julia, an 8-year-old little Gladness, a little girl called Shirley, and a 10-year-old little boy called Robert, and several skulls on this crime scene. The suspect was identified as Moses Mokgethi from Carltonville, and he was arrested by the East Rand murder and robbery. Now, Robert's parents identified him as a TV repairman that had visited their house on the day that Robert had disappeared in 1991. And unbeknownst to them, a month before that, he was arrested for the rape of a 9-year-old girl and a 17-year-old girl, but he had escaped. So he confessed, and he said he did sell the body parts for muti, but he strangled the children, and he would return to the harvest the next day, and then he would harvest the body parts. And he was interested in their genitals, in their hearts and their livers, and he sold it at that stage for about 300 Rand, which is about $16. Moses had a common law wife, and he had 2 children. He completed grade 9 in school, and he also built a helicopter that could actually fly. He was sentenced by Judge M.J. Stradham for 6 life sentences for the little girls and the murders of the boys, and 12 years for the rape of the little girl. So he was identified as a serial killer, categorized, not as a muti murderer, because of the little girl's testimony of the pleasure that he derived in actually torturing and killing them. So he sold the body parts to make a profit on the side, just as some serial killers would sell jewelry to make a profit on the side. In September 1998, I was called out to a crime scene near a town called Delmas. And I recalled the crime scene of Moses Sithole near the Boksburg prison, where we found 10 bodies. But this crime scene near Delmas resembled a battlefield, as there were several decapitated bodies on this crime scene. And we'd found the heads in the river not far from that. So eventually, through DNA, we could match 3 bodies with 3 heads. But then there was also another decapitated head which didn't have a body, and another body which didn't have a head. So the Commissioner of Police, George Fivers, went to the crime scene in his helicopter, which attracted, of course, a lot of press attention. And as the heat was on, the case went cold. Nothing happened. So my colleague, Superintendent Koos Fourie, and I visited local witch doctors, and they confirmed that it was probably the voice box that these harvesters were after. But of course, they denied any involvement in this case. So then on the 6th of April in 1999, another colleague of mine, Superintendent Donnie Hall, was called to a crime scene in a maize field of a decapitated body. And they identified this woman with her fingerprints. Her head was never found. And on the crime scene, Superintendent Hall collected cigarette stubs and beer cans. And by identifying this woman, they also got a description of two of the men that she was last seen in their company. And he put this out to the detectives. And then lo and behold, on the 26th of May, 1999, some detectives saw these two men actually walking in the street. And they brought them in to Superintendent Donnie Hall, who interrogated him. He identified Jan Muti Mokona and Chris Jan Mashiana. Now, Mokona acknowledged that he was a witch doctor, but neither of them would confess to these Muti killings. However, they were tied by their DNA to the crime scene and they were sentenced to life. We suspect that they did not confess to the Muti murders because they feared a more powerful master witch doctor which was behind this. Now, in March this year, 2024, South Africa was shocked when the mother and her boyfriend of a little girl called Jocelyn Smith, who disappeared from the Sudwana community on the 19th of February, were arrested for their being suspected of selling her body to a witch doctor. Now, that case is still ongoing. They claim they would receive 20,000 Rand, which is about $1,000 for Muti. That case is still ongoing. And we still, by making this video, have not found the body. So if you find these videos interesting, please give us your like, share them, and subscribe to the channel called Micki Pistorius Profiler on Record, and you'll receive my weekly videos.